good day to you all, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you had fun with our little forum man escapade yesterday. I actually found it very enjoyable to read through it and get some opinions, although it got very old very fast. I don't know how the guys have the time to do that, but it was an interesting little journey. Certainly not one we plan on doing a lot. But today we're going to actually get back into balls deep stuff that affects many of you. This actually came through as a series of long tweets from someone who was struggling with something, and it resonated so closely with me. Like, I've been in this situation from both sides, as a raid leader, as a guild master, and as a player on the other end. And I can only assume that many of you are either stuck in this situation and not really sure what to do, or maybe are going to encounter this. So I think it's worth making a video on it rather than the long-winded. I actually typed out a reply. It was huge. And I was like, okay, this is a video. Like, I am explaining things that affect many millions of people who play World of Warcraft, so we need to dive into this. So I'm going to give you the information I have. Okay, that's the best way of me going about this, is to explain it as I have received it, because this is something that's like a huge discussion. There are going to be elements that I'm going to have to assume, which is difficult, but I'll try and look at it from all sides so we can get the right answer. So it begins like this. I need some advice. I joined this guild just after this tier. So after all day, I joined a new BOD guild. Not sure if I wanted to dedicate to full-time raiding. I got a new job recently, but we raid 3 nights a week for 2 hours each, so 6 hours a week. We're currently 9 out of 9 heroic and 1 out of 9 mythic. We only killed Jaina heroic last week after spending 2 of our nights on her. So 1 farm night and then 2 nights on Jaina heroic. But at the cost, because they've got limited time, of skipping the first boss on mythic. So very normal procedure. If the last boss on heroic, we've seen this for several tiers now, is considerably more difficult than the first or even the first couple of bosses on mythic. So heroic guilds will go and get that free 415 loot. Like, why the hell not, right? Because our raid... Because our raid leader rather would get heroic Jaina down instead of the mythic boss, because we had 2-shot that the week before, because in his opinion, gear does not matter. Right now this week we did mythic first boss, so they started the week, they killed the mythic first boss. Then they went into heroic, they cleared some Mecha Talk in those couple of hours in the first raid night. They then log in for the second raid night. Now this is where it gets interesting. We had 18 people online. Instead of going to heroic and doing Mecha Talk, Stormwall, and Jaina, rather we went into mythic and did 18-man progress on Jadefire. We already had 1 member quit because it's just exhausting. What do you think of this? I'm just going to say I like the group. They're good guys and good players, but it just seems like constant bad ideas. Skip out on the free 415 loot to get a chance at 400 loot, or do 18-man mythic progression instead of farm. So we had this idea where we had 2 full days where we worked on a boss that only gave 400 loot. And then the next week we went into, well, I assume they had more than 20 at the time. I think that part of the information is missing. So they maybe had 20 or 22 people online and decided to go into heroic and do Jaina. And then the next time they only had 18 people online and decided to go do mythic at that point, which just seems really odd. Like, what, we've got the players to do this. Shouldn't we take advantage of the guys being online? It goes on to say, because I sent a reply saying, I'm going to look at this, it's going to be good. We're not the best, he says, but we are full heroic and starting mythic on an RP realm that's okay at least. We got Jadefire down to 10% with the 18 people with only 1 tank alive left alive, so we might get it tonight. He then says we got 20 people together, and on pull number 3 we did kill Jadefire, so Jadefire did die. And then goes on to say, I did notice, and there's been some mockery, here we go. We are mythic raiding, and some of our members are Azerite level 35 and 36. I'm currently 45 without any farming. Now, I do call a bit of shenanigans there. I'm 45. I had to farm for it. I was mocked for bringing this up, as it has been 2 weeks of him being in the guild. Is that my fault? Do the 3, 4, and 5 traits not matter that much? So that's the information we have on this scenario. And I have no doubt this sounds very familiar to you, where your raid leader is making decisions that just don't seem to make sense for the progress or what you believe is the best path for the guild to take. It's a very simple situation that you guys are put in, certainly if you're raiding flex. You've got 22 people online, you've got 1 boss left in heroic, but you know there's like this free loot just sat there, and we can go and get it with the dudes online right now. We could just go in there for 10, 15 minutes and go and grab this loot. We don't even need to work on Jadefire. Like, what's the point? Why are we skipping out on this 415 loot for the entire reset, right? And then the next time you're getting online, you haven't got 20 people, but now we're going to go and do Jadefire? What's the story here? So it comes down to one big thing that's going to be the main theme of everything here, and it's the only thing that I can guarantee is true, but I'm going to elaborate on it a little bit because it's important that you ask the right questions as well. But we have, what we've discussed in the past, is we have a raid leader who's not communicating with his raid. And we could say that is absolute certainty because of the frustrations and people leaving and all this, and people not understanding why we're doing what we're doing, right? If the raid leader had expressed very clearly his reasoning behind doing this, why he feels this is the right decision for us to make, then you could say, I disagree with that. Our raid leader says, we're going to do this tonight because of this, and this reason, right? So in my guild, especially, usually at the end of most raid nights or before the raid starts, usually on a Wednesday, which is our reset, Alex, usually, who's our raid leader from the Fat Boss guys, will give maybe like 2 or 3 minutes chat about anything that happened during the week since the last raid, any changes that I've made, anybody's going on holiday, so we need to cover people over this kind of period. Things like that, just make sure everybody's on the same page. And then after the raid, if it's been like a tough progression night, so we've been working on Jane and Mythic, that's now dead, but you know, after those nights, like, okay, we need to focus on this is what we need to be looking at until the next raid, things like that. So keeping the information flowing amongst everybody. So an often call will be, don't disappear right away, just want to say, do this, this, and this. So it might be 30 seconds, it might be 5 minutes, something like that. So just to make sure everybody's on the same page, because if there's no communication, it all breaks down because there's no focus outside of just when you're all together in the raid, right? So there's the focus in this little bit, which starts with confusion, ends with frustration, very annoying. Whereas if there's good communication, starts on a clear note, you know exactly what you're doing and why you're doing it. And then it finishes on a note with things to do outside of that, which might even be, hey, can you guys try and smash some Mythic Plus? And then you'll have the raid breakaways. Like, has anybody got time for Mythic Plus? Have you got some time tomorrow? All this kind of stuff, right? Going on at exactly the same time, away from that, and then coming back together and progressing as the raid leader hopefully decided. Because you do have the raid leader who is supposedly leading you on the correct path. There are a lot of terrible raid leaders out there. I've encountered some that are atrocious, absolutely atrocious, and it's painful, and it's upsetting, it's annoying, especially if you are now in a position where you know better. But if they're making you second guess yourself, it's even worse. So let's talk about some possible ideas that are going on here, right? Because people are leaving now because of this situation. Firstly, this is the transition from Heroic into Mythic. This is ultimately super painful in World of Warcraft. Moving up a difficulty is something I encountered, luckily, in Vanilla. I encountered it in Vanilla, and it blew my mind. And I have to say, I was a very different person then, and I just could not, for the life of me, despite not being a kid, I just could not understand the mentality of these players. It makes no sense to me that if you beat level 1 of a game, that you don't then go to level 2, like, and then level 3 and 4 and 5. Like, that's just pure logic to me. When I was raid leading my Molten Core guild, once we defeated Ragnaros, the obvious and like unquestionable path to take as the raid leader is like, we're going to Blackwing Lair now. Like, why the hell wouldn't we? Why would we just farm level 1 of the game when there's 2, 3, and 4 like available right now? Why wouldn't we do that? And as soon as I said, like, well, going to Blackwing Lair now, people just disappeared. And I ran into the situation that many of you will run into is farm night is what we call it, and still called it today. It's farm night, Wednesday, the reset day. We're going to go into Molten Core and grab gear. Remember, gear was much more rare in Vanilla. You only got like 2 or 3 drops per boss for a 40-man raid. We would have 50 plus people online, 50, 52 people online to get into that 40-man raid. Once Ragnaros died and sorting the raid out for Blackwing Lair, or the next day, typically, the raid would finish with Ragnaros. Once we got to, right, it's Blackwing Lair tomorrow, 30 people online. And it was just unbelievable. And you would see people make it so blatantly obvious, like, are we doing Onyxia tonight? Right? Something like that, which Onyxia was usually like a 20-minute diversion to go and kill Onyxia and get the tier 2 helms. Are we doing Onyxia tonight? No, we're doing Blackwing Lair. 5 minutes later, that person's gone offline. Like, they have... This is my first real encounter of people who have no interest in actually beating the game. They just want the rewards, right? They just want the rewards, and they absolutely do not want to wipe for it. They really don't want to be stuck repairing their gear, which was difficult at the time. It wasn't like today, really. People were often out of money. We had to lend money to players just to repair their items, let alone get consumables. So I had to deal with this in the only way I thought reasonable, because as the raid leader, it made no sense to me. Like, I was actually so angry at these people because it was the only logical step to take. And so the way I tackled it at that time, and incorrectly, many of you have seen the screenshot, is I would say, right, Molten Core is on Wednesday, 50 people online, we're going to Blackwing Lair, we're not going to Molten Core, and I would proceed to stick them in front of Razor Gore, something like that. What's he called? The Egg guy, Egg Bro. I would stick him in front of Egg Bro all night, and we wouldn't kill it. Like, we would wipe that all night, and then the next day, I kind of had no choice but to get the guys into Molten Core, because I think at the time we only raided 2 days a week. I took that screenshot, not genuinely thinking at the time, slight admission here, thinking that I was a total badass and cool dude. I took that screenshot of that. That's why I still have it to this day. And it's a really good reminder for me of how badly I treated people and the game at the time. Like, I genuinely thought I was cool for saying that. Which is, of course, if we're going to Blackwing Lair now, I've told them all it's Molten Core, then we get them all in the raid. Now we're going to Blackwing Lair. We're not going to Molten Core. And if you feel the need to leave after a few wipes, you're going to be punished. And I would just kick them from the guild. And I did kick people from the guild who were freaking out over this. And I thought I was cool for doing that. I thought I was the badass. I thought I was, and I also, in some defense, I also thought I was doing what was best for the guild. Like, we had definitely had people there who wanted to kill Blackwing Lair. A lot of people. So it was 30 odd people logging in to do Blackwing Lair. It was the other 15, 16 people who had absolutely no interest in doing Blackwing Lair. Now, with guilds that are going to Heroic to Mythic, you're going to have this situation more now than ever before. Certainly if they joined the guild when it was a Heroic guild. Like, people join a Heroic guild with certain expectations. That expectation likely, at a minimum, is to kill Heroic Jaina. And have absolutely no interest whatsoever in moving up to Mythic. No interest at all. They have zero reason to want to do it. It's not because of gear. They don't care about the prestige at the cost of the amount of gold, the amount of time, the amount of wiping, the amount of frustration, all that. On top of other reasons, like they don't have the confidence to deal with Mythic raiding and don't want to do it. A lot of people have confidence issues in the game, and they might feel that they're just going to be a waste of time, a dead leg. People are going to start shouting at them, all these kinds of things, and they don't want any part of it. They're quite happy to be in an environment like Heroic where they can fuck up from time to time, if not more often than not, and it's not that big of a deal. It simply is not that big of a deal. Other people can make up for many mistakes in Heroic raiding, and therefore they're more than happy to be in that environment and collect nice gear, and usually at a really quick pace, because the Heroic fights aren't that challenging. Once you've tried, certainly if you find Heroic as a decent difficulty level for you, then you might struggle a little bit, but you're eventually going to like do the repetition. You're going to see the fights a few times, and you're going to get around it, and you're going to be okay. And that's what they're happy with. They're more than happy with that. Now, the raid leader might be very much aware of this. So let's talk about the raid leader's motivations here and what they might be. One, he's very much aware there are people in his core raid team. So we often see this referenced when it's dealing with Flex, is we have a core raid team, and that might be 9 people. And then the rest of them are kind of people I can't say whether they're going to be here next week or not. And we have this sort of like extra amount of people, and we take whoever's online at the time who wants to come, and we go in with those guys, right? So a lot of guilds function this way. At that point, you're essentially running a semi-organized pug. Although you're within a guild, realistically speaking, it's more of a pug environment than anything else, because the guys aren't being consistent or anything like that. Now, your raid leader might be fully aware that absolutely no interest in doing Mythic. So, one, he doesn't want to communicate that they're doing Mythic and pushing Mythic. It's not what a lot of people signed up for, as we just talked. Like, I have no interest in doing Mythic at all. I just want to farm Heroic. Like, I'm more than happy to farm Heroic and then log out for the week and get on with something else, play a different game, whatever it might be. But your raid leader has different motivations. Now, what are those motivations? One might be loot. Obviously, he wants 415 loot. Fair enough. Now, I don't think that's the case, because he pushed you down to do Heroic Jaina for 2 nights rather than going that 415 loot. I don't think he's a loot-driven raid leader, but I'm making assumptions. The other reason is because he wants to do Mythic, right? He does want to do Mythic, But you're clearly lacking a consistent roster to do Mythic, because the big change, obviously, from Heroic to Mythic is you need those 20 people, and those 20 people also have to be appropriate classes and specs. Like, you can't have 6 healers, for example. That's not going to work. So you need 20 plus people online every single raid in order to make this work. Or it doesn't work at all. It just falls apart very quickly. Now then, one thing that I definitely have experience with here during the Burning Crusade is my raid leader was very aware that any slight gain the guild does makes you more prestigious, makes you more eye-catching, makes your odds of getting players better. So despite our raid progress being very good, we were on a very busy realm. We were on Sylvanas realm, which was massively overpopulated. So every little scrap of stuff we can do that pushed our guild a little bit higher than the last, that's where people wanted to go. So we were even like one guild down will get way less recruits than the one above it. So considering you haven't got a full roster, your raid leader might be saying, right, we're going to do Mythic Jadefire with 18 people. And the reason is, if we kill that, we're above people who are 1 out of 9. And at this point in the game, 3 out of 9 is typically considered okay, but real Mythic BOD kind of starts about opulence. Like, before that, those are considered like the easy gift bosses, and I know some people wipe on those. I'm not being condescending there, but that's generally the community feeling, and I would say the raid feeling as well. If you consistently raid Mythic, you would say the first 3 are kind of gifts, and then opulence is where you really need to start playing properly, right? You can't get away with being a goofball. So killing 2 out of 9, but previous week also killing Jaina pushes you forward. Getting 9 out of 9 heroic does push you above the guys who are doing 8 out of 9 heroic and just doing the first boss, right? That moves you ahead. And you're looking for a good 4 or 5 players. If you're getting 18 online for Mythic, you are looking for 4 or 5 players. So the motivation of the raid leader might be, it's worth in the short term pushing hard with whoever we have to get our ranking up, because that's what it's going to take in order for us to flesh out our team to an actual Mythic raiding team, because you're not there yet, right? You're not quite there yet. If you've got 18 people online, you're not quite there yet. You're very close, but you're not quite there yet. What's the best short-term plan here in order to make that happen? And that will be pushing the ranking up, right? You can definitely get recruits, but the lower your ranking, the lesser quality recruits you're going to be getting, generally speaking. And people who are good, who are like, I've already killed 3 out of 9, or I've killed 2 out of 9, or I killed Heroic Jaina, are going to look at a guild that's, say, 8 out of 9 with 1 out of 9 Mythic and go, but this one's got 9 out of 9 and 2 Mythic kills. I would rather be in that one. So I'm going to apply there, right? Very, very ordinary thought process, and your raid leader might be very aware of that. The other thing is, your raid leader just wants to do the bosses in some sort of order, and that's it. He doesn't really care. And he might also be under some sort of delusion that 18, like 20 is recommended. I've actually seen this said a few times. It's really painful that 20 is like the recommended amount, but you can do it with less. I don't know about that. Let's look at some of the other comments he made, though. One, firstly, the gear doesn't matter. So I agree with him here. I agree with him. If you're killing 8 out of 9 working on Jaina and you're killing the first boss in Mythic at this stage, right, since BOD came out, unquestionably, unless you've replaced most of your roster with like rerolls or something, unquestionably your raid is overgeared for that content. Like, unquestionably. It would be extraordinarily unlikely that you are undergeared, because it just shouldn't be possible, in all honesty. With the amount of Warfronts we've had since BOD's come out, the amount of farm kills you guys have probably had, and killing the first boss in Mythic before doing Jaina, all those factors, plus the occasional Mythic Plus, you know, the occasional 10 chest, the Titan Residuum allowing you to buy some stuff, all that stuff contributed. It's unquestionable you're way overgeared for it. And his gear doesn't matter might also reference, why are you wiping? And this is a big thing that a lot of people don't really understand. There was a wonderful post on the Paragon forums where they discussed combat reses and why they wipe. And what it really broke down is, like, you might say something like, we wiped because the tank died, right? Tank died, so we wiped. Okay, so what led to that death, though? And this is where Paragon really showed their true enlightenment in the aspects of raiding, is that actually you could maybe even trace this back. And they went through the process of when a player died or something like that. They went through the process of Well, actually, the tank died because he had to use a cooldown like 30 seconds earlier. He had to use that cooldown 30 seconds earlier because this healer screwed up over here and got CC'd or silenced or something along those lines, meaning he was lacking healing. So, in fact, the cause of the wipe was the healer, right? The healer 30 seconds ago led to a situation that caused the tank to die later, right? And then they also looked at the idea of combat reses. So I think it was particularly in reference to the robots, Omnitron defense system, I want to say. My memory could be scuffed on this. Omnitron defense system in it's in Blackrock Mountain, Blackrock Descent, something like that. The Omnitron defense system, and some people saying it was a bullshit fight because some combinations very rarely could lead to a guaranteed death. And their response to that was, but you have combat reses to counter that. And people say, well, we've had to use our combat res elsewhere. That's your problem. It's not this one-shot mechanic. Like, that's not ideal, of course, right? An unavoidable death is not ideal. But it's very rare, and yes, it's unavoidable. Like, there are definitely combos that can kill people, but that's why you have a combat res as well. The issue you're actually having is whatever's making you use your combat reses before that point on the avoidable deaths. That's what's leading to this problem you're having later on. If someone should get that combo and die, you should have a combat res available in order to counter that and still progress with the entire team alive. That's absolutely the case. And it was really nice to see the breakdown, because it's the way I think about it. It's like, okay, so why are we out of mana at 30%? Did we screw up at 10% that caused all the healers to zerg all their mana? Were we taking excess damage? Were people being lazy? Because that filtered down, and this butterfly effect occurred throughout the raid, where it ended up with us wiping much later. Whereas some raid leaders and some players would go, oh, we wiped because the healers were in. Like, that doesn't help us in any way. Healers don't be They might even put the focus back on the healers. Healers don't be right? So that's the problem. So if your raid leader it's important that you understand why you're wiping. So if you're freezing to Jaina, right, what were your 2 days worth of wipes? Were you wiping because people were getting frozen? Because it doesn't matter if those guys are wearing 600 item level at that point. It really makes no difference. If they're getting frozen when they shouldn't be getting frozen, doesn't matter what gear they have. Now, if you're wiping to DPS checks, which don't really exist in BOD besides Jaina, Mythic Jaina has some DPS checks. Stormwall, you could say, has some, but it's manageable. There's a very manageable aspect to that that's not a big deal. Gear does cover mistakes. Undoubtedly, it covers mistakes. You have more HP, you do more damage, the boss dies quicker, you heal more. Undoubtedly. But there are lots of mechanics, certainly once you're reaching the levels you guys are talking about, and absolutely 100% in Mythic, that gear is not helpful. You literally need to be able to play the mechanic correctly. It doesn't matter how much gear you have, you're not going to get around it. There's no mechanic in BOD that gear is going to prevent you getting until, like, the last tier of the game. So, in that respect, I believe he is correct. You should have expanded on it and said, we're not wiping to that. This is often why, I made a point of this in the World First race, when I was casting it, is that people were like, you should change comps, you should do this and that, and they need more damage and stuff like that. And the guys were just, like, carrying on doing it, and people getting very confused. Why are the guys just carrying on doing this when they're not making it? Because they were wiping in phase 3 at like 17%. They still had so far to go. It's like, they're not going to do it. They're not going to do it. And the guys were just confidently saying, no, this is all player error at this point. And the only time we will consider swapping this around is if we play correctly and we still wipe, okay. Then we need to reevaluate something. But until that point, until the players stop fucking up, we're not there yet. This is not a gear issue yet. And I spoke to the guys off camera and they're like, no, it's not a gear thing. We're fucking up. We're making errors. We're taking extra damage. We're taking too much stuff. We're not moving correctly. All this stuff is still happening. It's not a gear issue that's wiping us right now. And that's a really prophetic way of looking at it, because that's exactly what it turned out to be in the end, is they're correct. It wasn't a gear issue. They absolutely had the gear to do it. They were player errors that were causing the problems. And in which case, gear's not a factor there, right? The other thing that you brought up, so my ultimate, the answer is still the first bit, right? So if anybody's listened to the rest of it, I hope that's been a bit more enlightening for you, but the answer is still the third bit. It's bad communication from the raid leader, because you don't know what the vision is for the team right now. He might know what his motivations are. I don't know. Let's come down to one last point before we finish up here, is the Azerite levels. The 3, 4, and 5 traits don't matter that much. So 5 is the item level one. Excuse me if it's not, but I believe it is. So we have ring 1, which is class-based, ring 2 class-based. Then we have the overall one, which is 3. Then we have defensive 4. So 5 is the item level. No, the item level one doesn't really matter. because that's the same thing we talked about. It's just more power. The first 3, though, are absolutely mandatory. And the 4th one is as well, in my opinion. If you're Mythic raiding, like Heroic, you can get away with it. And it's a little bit similar to the Mythic tax that we talked about in the forum video, is this Mythic raid tax. And the truth of the matter is, and one of the reasons that Mythic raiders get really pissed off, and a lot of people don't really get it, is that the Azerite armor and the way it's set out, the defensive traits are far more valuable in the Mythic raid scene than they are anywhere else in the game, besides like high-end Mythic Plus, right? Very high-end Mythic Plus. And that's because, as we've just talked about, you're now in an environment where the healers are being pushed, right? They're being pushed to their point just on the actual unavoidable damage that people are taking, right? So in Heroic, you can heal the unavoidable damage plus mistakes. In Normal, you can do that even more. LFR, you can heal whatever. Like, there's nothing you need to do there. But in Heroic, your healers are fully capable of healing the unavoidable damage plus mistakes and being okay. In Mythic, once you're overgeared, you can certainly do this. But in Mythic, it's generally a case of the raids are designed so that mistakes will kill you. And that's when having the defensive traits becomes really, really important, because you're going to make mistakes. There will be mistakes on any first kill. There's very rarely the perfectly smooth first kill of anything. There's always going to be mistakes. And the amount of damage you're generally taking, certainly on first kills and while progressing, you look at fights like Conclave on Mythic, the amount of damage the raid takes there, and usually if DPS isn't good enough, you have to take even more damage and your healers get stressed more. You look at the logs of those fights of how powerful raid-wide having the defensive Azerite traits is. They're boring, that doesn't change, but they're very, very strong. And this is exactly why, pre-BOD coming out, Mythic Raiders were burning out left and right, because they're fully aware, like the experienced ones are fully aware of how important it is to not only have all 3 of those large DPS increases, like some of those individual traits, like 1600 DPS on their own, let alone stacked up. Then you've got 2 rings of that, adding significant damage. Then you've got very powerful extra ones, like overwhelming power on top of that. And not only that, you're going to be taking more damage than you can face nearly anywhere in the game, and that makes the defensives more powerful at the same time. So all these things needed to be unlocked the moment you got your Azerite gear, which is why people set like these limits on their Azerite pieces to make sure that when we gave this loot out, people were getting their bonuses straight away. We set it really to the DPS ones, but really, really like try and get the defensive ones, because the defensive ones are a very big deal. I believe that's how it went. So in answer to your question, yes, but that's the reason why. The reason why is in the Mythic environment, that's where it makes more sense. So Heroic to Mythic is a very difficult process, and the way your raid leader goes about it is absolutely crucial to making sure it works. Because you can tell people who have no interest in Mythic, it's like, look, we really want to push our rank up so we can get people who are fully into Mythic. If you help us out, I mean, imagine this is conversations, like, we want to kill, like, Jadefire and Krong, right? They're pretty easy Mythic bosses. I know you're not interested in Mythic, but these are the pretty easy bosses. More than happy for you to come for every Heroic farm clear we do. Like, you've helped us get here. That's awesome. If you're not interested in Mythic, cool. We're still going to be farming Heroic for a while. You're more than welcome to that, but we'd really appreciate it if you would come in for some Mythic bosses so we can get our rank up, so we can get guys in who just want to do Mythic. And because Heroic's flex, it doesn't matter if those guys are here. They are not taking their spot. It's not a battle for spots or anything like that. That kind of conversation can go a long way. A really long way to smoothing this over, avoiding the frustration, avoiding the burnout, and maybe even getting some help from some guys along that way, so that people who aren't committed to the Mythic thing will help you out. And on some occasions, they might find out, actually, this is really fun, like I think. All right, thank you very much for listening. I hope that answers your questions. I did have to make a lot of assumptions, but I hope you understand the mindset that might be going on. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.